It is said that by the mid-19th century, Norwich claimed more millionaires per capita than any other city in the United States. More than 50 residents earned in excess of $1 million a year in today's money. Norwich's strategic position, halfway between Boston and New York, made it a desirable location where trade and industry flourished. By the eve of the Civil War, the city was the third largest in the state after Hartford and New Haven. Norwich's three rivers, the Yannock, Thames, and Shetucket, powered important industrial mills, such as the Panema Textile Mills and the Hopkins and Allen Arms Company, among other profitable enterprises. The harbor at Chelsea Landing, which is downtown, was a bustling seaport, a major shipbuilding center, and a hub of wealth, commerce, and influence. Direct access to the Norwich and Worcester Railroad, established in 1840, and a steamship line also put Norwich on the map by transporting goods and people in and out of town. Join us as we explore the opulence and elegance of Norwich in the Gilded Age. By the early 1800s, the Millionaires Triangle, bordered by Broadway, Broad Street, and Washington Street, was on the way to becoming the city's finest residential district. Although the elite classes that once populated the Millionaires Triangle have largely vanished into the annals of Norwich history, a stroll through the neighborhood reveals much about the extravagant Victorian tastes that made this area an architectural showpiece. The oldest building on our route, a former 1789 tavern known as the Joseph Teal House, is the only stop to predate the 1797 Chelsea Parade, a tranquil piece of greenery that helped make the area one of Norwich's most desirable addresses in the 19th century. For most of that time, the Teal House was occupied by the industrialist and shipping magnate General William Williams and his wife Harriet Peck Williams, a philanthropist in her own right. The area's early prestige is reflected in its many fine residences in the Greek Revival style, which became popular in the first half of the 19th century. This style coincided with the early rise of Norwich as a maritime and industrial city. Inspired by well-publicized archaeological discoveries in Greece, this conservative style relied on the ancient classical Greek orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, and a precise geometry used to elegant effect. The imposing column porticos and Greek motifs associated with the Greek Revival conveyed an instant message of good taste and well-being. By the Civil War era, ornate mansions and fabulous gardens made this neighborhood the embodiment of the Gilded Age, a period synonymous with the opulent lifestyles of the Victorian era's class of self-made millionaires. Shipping merchants of the early decades were followed by a steady stream of bankers, financiers, manufacturers, publishers, lawyers, railroad executives, philanthropists, and the governor, a U.S. senator, and acting vice president. Edith Caro Roosevelt, President Theodore Roosevelt's second wife and First Lady, was born in 1861 at the home of her grandfather, General Daniel Tyler, at 130 Washington Street. Connecticut's Civil War-era governor, William Buckingham, who lived at 307 Main Street, had strong social and family ties to the Triangle. By the 1860s, the Italianate style was in high fashion in the Triangle. Tastemakers of the day were enthusiastic promoters of the Italianate villa, a squarish building type inspired by the villas of medieval Tuscany. Never mind that its low-pitched roof was ill-suited to New England's snowy winters, or that its signature cupola was originally intended to draw up warm air in the hot, dry Tuscan climate. The style struck the right notes of intrigue, invoking the mystery of exotic and unfamiliar places under the influence of the Romantic movement. The Gothic Revival and the French Second Empire were similar expressions of Victorian-era taste, which rejected the Greek Revival in favor of exotic decorations and bright color schemes. By the end of the Civil War, preferences were turning to European historical revivals, like the Romanesque revival style, which harkened back to the craftsmanship of Western Europe's many churches and monuments in the decades after the Roman Empire. Stephen Earle, architect of the turreted Slater Memorial Museum, deftly employed the style to convey a look of gravitas, similar to that of the equally dignified Park Congregational Church, which also was designed by Earle. Among more recent buildings on our route, the 1891 Briggs House was a modern design for its time, as an example of the shingle style, which referenced traditional New England building materials, shingles and fieldstone, and colonial motifs to create a uniquely American expression. As members of this high society intermarried, they often merged their fortunes, creating more unimaginable wealth. Leonard Ballou became a highly successful as a cotton manufacturer, earning his family a spot among society's most desired social circles. His daughter Lydia married John Young, co-founder with Charles Lewis Tiffany of the famed Tiffany & Company. The Tiffany connection to Norwich runs deep. Young's sister Harriet married Charles Tiffany. The Young's nephew, Louis Comfort Tiffany, designed stained glass windows for the United Congregational Church at 87 Broadway and Christ Episcopal Church at 78 Washington Street. He married Norwich native Mary Woodbridge Goddard in 1872. A niece, Ellen Peck, married William A. Slater, heir to the fortune of his industrialist father. Another high-profile society marriage occurred in 1844 when Mariana Hubbard and John Fox Slater were wed. Mariana Hubbard was the daughter of noted mill owner and transportation magnate Amos Hubbard, granddaughter of a U.S. Senator James Landman, and niece of noted political figure Lafayette Foster, who would later become a senator and acting vice president of the United States. John Slater was the nephew of Samuel Slater, the father of the American Industrial Revolution. He bought the house next to the Hubbards when he moved here to oversee the Slaters' Connecticut mills. The Slaters became the wealthiest among Norwich's Gilded Age family. By 1870, John Slater's fortune was estimated at $1.7 million, about $442 million in today's currency, making him wealthier than John D. Rockefeller, who was just then starting Standard Oil. The Slaters' assets did not protect them from tragedy. Of their 6 children, only 2, Mariana and William, reached adulthood. After 30 years of marriage, Mariana and John went through a mysterious separation, though they remained legally married. Mariana lived at a home built for her at 274 Broadway, and the couple lived separately until their deaths. Though Norwich's millionaire classes spent lavishly on their own lifestyles, large amounts of money also trickled down to the community. These interests show an understanding of important social issues which arose in a tumultuous era, marked by the end of slavery and the rise of immigrant workforces. Norwich's millionaires also oversaw commissions for some of the city's most stunning civic and commercial architecture, including City Hall and County Courthouse in 1870 to 73 and the Panema Mills in the Taffville sections, one of the city's largest textile production centers when it opened in 1866. Organizations such as Otis Library, Norwich Free Academy, Slater Memorial Museum, Backus Hospital, and many more came as a result of philanthropic contributions. General and Mrs. William Williams individually provided funding for Norwich Free Academy, and in her will, Mrs. Williams funded establishment of a girls' school, which is now known as the Williams School in New London. Moses Pierce donated his Norwich Town home to the town as an orphanage. Slater and Lafayette Foster provided funding for a building to house United Workers, the city's original social service welfare agency. Moses Pierce and John Slater were among concerned citizens that formerly enslaved people in the South would be able to support themselves. Pierce funded a manual training program at Hampton Institute in Virginia. In 1882, Slater provided $1 million to establish the John F. Slater Fund for the Education of the Southern Freedmen. The mansions of Norwich's Chelsea Parade District recall an era of Gilded Age excess, when running a suitably fashionable household required staffing it with a legion of domestic workers, personal maids, laundresses, housekeepers, cooks, groundskeepers, and coachmen, to name a few. During the Victorian period, candidates typically came from a swelling workforce of immigrants who often found it hard to get other types of jobs due to lack of training or to prejudice. Many Irish natives, among the first wave of immigrants to Norwich in the mid-1800s, found work as domestic servants, but Swedes, Germans, British, Japanese, and many others appear in census records, as do African Americans. While pay could be low, wages often included room and board. Lafayette Foster, at 315 Broadway, housed his Irish coachman and wife as well as their 6 children. The Bill family, at 270 Broadway, had the same Scottish housekeeper, Jenny Murray, for 50 years, suggesting a loyalty that could bind employers to their employees despite the class and cultural differences that were inevitably present. Norwich is fortunate to have so many fine examples of 19th century architecture. Going forward, it will be important to try to preserve as much as we can of this part of our heritage. If you'd like to learn more about Norwich in the Gilded Age, please visit walknorwich.org and explore the Norwich Millionaires Triangle. If you'd like to learn more about the families that lived during this era in Norwich, please consider purchasing the book, Norwich in the Gilded Age, by Patricia Staley. Many portraits of the millionaires from this era are on display at Slater Memorial Museum, and their impressive monuments are in Yenick Cemetery.